So today I'm going to talk about the 8 top tips to improve security. And this is really a follow-on from one of my previous videos where I set out some of the issues that we see with companies in risk assessment. And these top tips are really form 20% of improvements, if you like, that generate the most value for businesses. So I'm not saying these are all of them, but if you focus on these 8, you're a long way to getting some of those improvements. So one of the first things is to conduct, I talked about risk assessment, but is to conduct an all-inclusive risk assessment. So don't just focus on your digital assets, but think about what else do you have as an organization that's valuable. So think about your digital assets, your environmental factors, for example, your physical environment, and also think about how you do business. So if you sell through partners in certain countries, then think about including them in your risk assessment because they represent your company in that country. So you should really think about including them in that risk assessment. And also they may be a target by cyber criminals to actually learn more about your company and actually use them as a back door into your own organization. So make sure that when you think about doing a risk assessment, you include a holistic risk assessment. So think about everything. Now, how often should they be conducted is something I get asked all the time. I would say at least annually, but obviously it depends on your business. But at least do them annually. If anything changes, so if you stand up a new service, so for example, you suddenly have a new e-commerce site, or if you go into a new country or a new business, then every time you do any of that, make sure that risk assessment forms part of that. And make sure that you do that as part of the overall project management process, so security is actually baked in for that solution rather than adding it on at a later stage. So that's the first thing. So that's my first tip. The second tip is really focusing on your high value assets. And again, a lot of companies struggle with this. You may know what your high value assets are, but a lot of companies struggle with where are they and what do we need to protect them. So very simple things you can do here is find where those high value assets are, find out who owns them, find out who has access to them, particularly privileged access users, because they are typically the ones that are targeted with spear phishing or phishing attacks, who owns the risk for that specific digital asset. And then the final one is how is that risk managed? You need to know that to make sure that you have a view of how you protect what's most important to your business. The third tip is really look at threat modeling. And again, a lot of companies, I guess, don't have the right experience to think about threat modeling or vulnerability modeling. And it really comes down to a very simple formula. And you know, in the security business, everybody knows that formula, and it's risk equals threat times vulnerability times cost of loss. It's not always that easy to do because you can't necessarily quantify what that loss is. But it's still a good model to use to give you some sort of idea on what could happen to the business. And it's also an opportunity to do some what-if scenarios. So think about, what if something happens? What if you have a breach? What would be the potential loss of that breach? So think about how you can do threat modeling and think about involving everyone. So involve all the key stakeholders, but involve the whole business. Because if you have an attack on the business, then everybody's going to be affected. So think about making it an exercise for the whole business rather than just the security team. So that's my third tip. The fourth tip is down to change management. Now, patch management is kind of integral to security, but actually change management is kind of a more bigger business view, if you like. So making sure that you document all changes and you have a defined process for that. Security people are probably the worst at doing this because they always think, well, we're under pressure to deliver this service, so we'll deliver it and we'll come back and tick the box and say we've done it. Chances are it either doesn't happen or that person leaves or that particular service changes. But of course, every time you change a service, there may be another 10 systems behind it that actually open up new vulnerabilities, and you don't know that. So make sure that you have a really good defined change management process that you can follow every time anything happens within your business, and that'll stand you in really good stead for the future, both for compliance and also for setting up new systems. So with looking at security staff, make sure that you are deploying security staff selectively and strategically. So think about the people that you've got working in your security team. And again, a common pitfall is that because security resources are very scarce and you're under a lot of pressure from budget and from the right skills, then you simply don't have enough people to do this. And everybody sits around just looking at logs and what can you do with these logs and what do they mean. So think about how you can change the way that you manage your security team, and particularly if you have a security operations center. And in a recent report by RSA, which is one of our SBIC reports called Creating an Extended State-of-the-Art Team, it kind of talks about 4 areas that SOCs in the future will have. So think about having the sorts of skills like cyber risk assessment skills, consultancy, risk consultancy skills, security data management, and change and process management. And those 4 areas will really help you look at cyber attacks in the future, particularly from a security operations center perspective. So, so that's really talking about security staff itself. So coming on to number 6, think about how you can make the most change by doing very little. And by that I mean think about how you can integrate your processes into technology. So you can't do everything if you're under stresses of budget and skills, but the most improvement you can make is actually by integrating some of your security processes into technology, so automating some of that. So if you automate things like workflow and event management and set up the right triggers and alerts, then actually, rather than somebody sitting there and seeing maybe thousands of logs coming in, it'll actually help them focus on 10 to say these are the 10 areas that you need to focus on, and actually help them remediate some of those automatically as well. So think about having some kind of automation that takes into account your security process and technology, and that really helps you to scale your limited resources that you have and get the most productivity out of making a relatively small change. So number 7 is really looking at investing in threat intelligence. And threat intelligence historically has been something that either big companies or governments do, but now more and more SMEs are looking at it for a number of reasons. They basically want to be seen as good citizens to maintain their relationships and their businesses with the bigger companies that they do business with. And also because they see themselves as not having the right skill sets, they're actually looking to see what can they do to help them improve their security and use information that's already available outside. So it's not necessarily about buying an expensive service, so not saying, yes, you can buy expensive services, but it's really about looking at threat intelligence that's available already. You can start really simple. If you've got perimeter technology like firewalls, antivirus, or IDS, IPS type systems, or even your web servers, your external web servers, then look at the information that you can actually get from that. And 2 really quick examples, if you see increased traffic either from a certain country or from a certain IP address, that perhaps could show that it's a reconnaissance site. So that's a really quick indicator using the information that you may have already within your business. And another example is that if you have biographies of some of your employees that are customer facing, and you see a lot of traffic to those specific biographies, that may show that somebody's actually doing some intelligence work to work out a spear phishing campaign to actually target those specific employees. So really simple, quick wins, if you like, by using threat intelligence. And of course, you can subscribe to third-party threat intelligence as well if you want to. And then my final tip to help you improve security is really trying to quantify the impact of security. And everybody says, security and ROI, it just doesn't happen. And the reality is it doesn't. It's very difficult to actually come up with a return on investment when it comes to security. So some of the things that you can do is that when you're doing the modeling, think about not only the cost of the breach itself and being able to remediate from that breach, but include cost of things like backup systems. So, you know, if you've got your main systems are down because they need to be taken down and cleaned, then you actually need to have another backup system that's going to keep your business going in the interim. So make sure that you cost that into it as well, and that helps you, again, to look at a much bigger plan in terms of how you can help, how security can help keep the business going. So really think about the business harm and the security element of it going forward. So those are the 8 top tips to help you improve security. So thank you for watching. You can follow me on Twitter or read my blogs.